the most dangerous psychological predators. They don't kick down your door demanding your submission. They don't announce themselves with arrogance or, physical intimidation. Instead, they stand outside shivering in the cold, waiting for your empathy to invite them in. Welcome to the debate.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredibly accurate.
Right? They trap their targets using the ultimate disguise, which is vulnerability, pseudo-humility, and this quiet, almost poetic victimhood. Today, we are tearing apart the mechanics of covert narcissism.
It's a pathology that operates entirely in the shadows.
Exactly. And, looking at the clinical source material, you and I approach this from very different angles. As a behavioral profiler, I look at the abuser. I see a predator executing a highly calculated strategy, deliberately weaponizing pity, passive aggression, and subtle manipulation just to extract power.
Right. And sitting across from these survivors every single day as a trauma therapist, I see something else entirely. I am looking at the blast radius.
The aftermath.
Yes. The true destructiveness of covert narcissism, it isn't just found in the abuser's behavioral mask. It's found in the invisible neurobiological hijacking of the victim. We are talking about severe physiological collapse. This pathology systematically destroys a person's sanity from the inside out, turning their own empathy and their own nervous system against them.
Well, let's start right at the point of contact then. To understand how they dismantle a person's reality, you first have to understand what I call their diagnostic camouflage. Because the covert narcissist is fundamentally a master of illusion. An overt narcissist walks into a room and tells you they're the best. A covert narcissist walks into a room, sits quietly in the corner, and waits for you to realize how deeply misunderstood they are.
Yeah, they play the martyr.
Right. They present a public persona of a devoted parent or a spiritual leader or the endlessly empathetic colleague who brings casseroles when someone is sick. They rely on society to look at them and see a pillar of the community.
Which is exactly why the survivor feels so completely isolated. When they try to tell their friends or family what's happening behind closed doors, literally no one believes them.
Exactly. Because the public mask is flawless. But behind those closed doors, they are running a completely different operational playbook.
Absolutely.
It begins with the construction of a customized projection. They don't just pick anybody, right? They scan a target to find out what that person is fundamentally starved for.
What their unmet needs are.
Yes. Is it safety, validation, a sense of belonging? The covert narcissist maps those unmet attachment needs and surgically alters their own personality to mirror them. They become the perfect puzzle piece to your empty space.
Right.
But it's an engineered trap. They do this only to secure you in what profilers call an attachment loop.
And let's break down exactly what that attachment loop does to the human brain, because it is not just a psychological trick, right? It is a biological hijacking.
How so?
Well, when they are mirroring you, playing that perfect soulmate, they are flooding your brain with dopamine and oxytocin. You feel profoundly seen and safe. But once they know you're hooked, the mask slips. The methodical devaluation begins.
They yank the rug out.
Exactly. And that sudden shift, from intense affection to cold, unexplained cruelty, it plunges the victim's brain into a severe cortisol flood.
Wow. Yeah.
And then they bring it back. They throw you a breadcrumb of that original warmth. Psychologically, it is intermittent reinforcement. Biologically, it turns the relationship into a slot machine.
So they get addicted.
Yes, the victim becomes biochemically addicted to the cycle of abuse, desperately pulling the lever, trying to get that oxytocin hit back. This is what we call a trauma bond. It traps the survivor in a permanent survival state that, clinically, resembles complex PTSD.
But see, you are focusing heavily on the victim's biochemical reaction. We cannot lose sight of the terrifying intentionality of the predator causing it.
I'm not losing sight of it.
Wait, look at how they use pity, though. Let's look at the primary tool they use to keep that slot machine running. The weaponization of pity is the hallmark of the covert profile. While an overt narcissist demands respect, A covert narcissist demands rescue.
Right, because if they play the ultimate victim, they are completely absolved of accountability.
Precisely. They use shifting blame and emotional withholding to maintain a constant power asymmetry. Look at how they actually deploy this in an argument. If you confront them about something they did wrong, they don't yell at you, they collapse.
Yeah.
They feign helplessness. They say things like, I guess I'm just a terrible person. I can't do anything right. Why do you even stay with me?
Oh my God, yes.
They force the target to drop their own valid grievance and immediately rush in to comfort the abuser. It's a tactic called weaponized incompetence. It is a highly calculated predatory tool designed to completely exhaust the target's boundaries.
Oh, I have to stop you there because framing it purely as a tactic minimizes the devastation it causes. That's not depression we're looking at, that's weaponized guilt, and it does something horrifying to the victim's reality.
Well, I'm not minimizing it,
But it's not just that the target is working harder to fix the relationship. This is covert gaslighting that causes the victim to literally stop trusting their own eyes and ears.
Okay, fair point.
When the abuser constantly shifts the narrative to make themselves the victim, the survivor's brain tries to adapt. It wants to solve the problem. So the victim develops this inner critic part that absorbs the abuser's blame.
They internalize the narcissist's voice.
They do. The survivor starts telling themselves, if I was just more understanding, if my tone wasn't so harsh, things would be fine.
Right.
The abuser successfully reframes the target's natural, healthy requests for basic connection as emotional instability or, excessive neediness. The victim stops seeing themselves as a loving partner and starts seeing themselves as a demanding burden. That is a profound, systemic erosion of self-trust and identity.
They completely rewrite reality. And when that active manipulation meets any kind of resistance, say the victim finally catches on and refuses to apologize, the covert narcissist pivots seamlessly to passive manipulation. This brings us to their most insidious weapon, which is the silent treatment.
The absolute worst of it.
The sudden, unexplained emotional withdrawal. And let's be clear about the mechanics here. This is not a person who is overwhelmed and, needs space to process their feelings. This is a deliberate, punitive strategy to control the emotional thermostat of the relationship.
Absolutely.
They withdraw to keep the victim desperate and off balance. And they pair this withdrawal with micro insults.
Those tiny, deniable digs.
Exactly. A slight eye roll, a deep theatrical sigh when you walk into the room, a backhanded compliment wrapped in a joke like, wow, you're actually wearing that out? So brave.
Ugh, yeah.
If the victim reacts to the insult, the narcissist instantly gaslights them, saying, geez, it was just a joke. You're so sensitive. You're always starting fights. It gives the predator total plausible deniability while completely devaluing the target.
And what happens to the target's body in that exact moment? This is exactly what trips victims up. They think they just need to communicate better.
Right.
But biologically, their hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, which is the body's central stress response system, is thrown into overdrive. Think of the HPA axis like a car alarm. The silent treatment isn't just an absence of words.
It's an attack.
To the victim's nervous system, it is an active looming threat. The car alarm is blaring 24/7.
Because they are waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yes, they are left walking on eggshells even when the abuser isn't in the room. You can actually see the physical toll on a survivor's face.
Really?
Yes. Because of this chronic hyperarousal, survivors experience severe emotional flattening. It's a clinical state called anhedonia. If the car alarm won't shut off, the only way the brain can survive the noise is to just pull the main fuse entirely.
Just shut down.
Right, but you cannot selectively numb emotion. When you pull the fuse to suppress your justified anger and your sheer terror just to survive the silent treatment, you also shut down your capacity for joy, creativity, and pleasure. They become shadows of themselves.
Look, I understand the severity of the biological response, but you are looking at the smoke, not the fire. The somatic symptoms you're describing are the byproduct of a parasite extracting resources. We have to look at the mechanism of extraction.
Okay, how so?
The abuser intentionally triggers that car alarm to harvest what we call narcissistic supply.
Narcissistic supply being the attention and validation they need to regulate their own empty self-esteem.
Correct. But for a covert narcissist, positive attention isn't enough. They feed on dysregulation. They feed on the victim's frantic attempts to restore the connection.
Right.
When they deploy the silent treatment and the victim is crying, begging for clarity, or apologizing for things they didn't even do just to keep the peace, the covert narcissist is internally flooded with a profound sense of power, control, and superiority.
That is so dark.
That is the core mechanism. They aren't just accidentally triggering the victim's HPA axis because of bad communication skills. They're pressing the panic button on purpose because they actively enjoy the reaction it produces. It makes them feel like a god.
Well, you're treating it like a technical interrogation. But when you expose that underlying mechanism, that the abuser is intentionally extracting supply through the victim's panic, you actually prove why my focus on the clinical reality is so crucial.
How do you figure?
Because that predatory mechanism makes standard therapeutic interventions not just ineffective, but incredibly dangerous.
Dangerous?
Yes. Standard talk therapy or couples counseling operates on a fundamental assumption of good faith. It assumes a mutual communication breakdown between two people who actually want to resolve a conflict.
Ah, right.
If a generic therapist looks at this dynamic and says to the victim, well, it takes two to tango. Let's explore your contribution to the conflict. It is utterly devastating.
Yeah, I can see that.
It is clinically re-traumatizing. It deeply reinforces the abuser's gaslighting. The therapist doesn't see the parasite, they just see a stressed couple. Healing requires specialized narcissistic abuse therapy that understands coercive control.
So it's about stabilization first.
Absolutely. The focus must be on nervous system stabilization and reality testing before any cognitive processing can even begin.
Okay, but if standard therapy fails because it assumes good faith, then how does a victim actually survive day to day when they can't just leave?
That's the hardest part.
Right, if they share custody of a child, for instance, or they work in the same department, that changes the entire operational playbook.
We have to look at the tactical methodologies required to interact with a predator when complete no contact is impossible. And clinically, I argue strongly for the gray rock method. Oh, I knew we were going to get here. I completely disagree.
Let me explain. It is the most tactically sound way to neutralize the threat. Gray rock is exactly what it sounds like. You make yourself as boring, unresponsive, and uninteresting as a gray rock on the ground.
I know what it is,
You offer brief, monosyllabic, non-committal answers. Okay, sure, I see. You do not justify, argue, defend, or explain. Remember the mechanism we just talked about, right? The narcissist feeds on your emotional dysregulation.
Yes, but
Gray rock cuts off the dopamine supply. When you don't flinch, you don't cry, and you don't argue back, they experience a psychological void. When the parasite realizes there's no more blood to extract, it moves on to an easier target.
gray rock is a fantastic theory in a vacuum, but I strongly disagree with it as a blanket prescription, particularly for highly sensitive persons or HSPs.
Why? It's defensive perimeter management. It works.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. It works on the abuser, but look at what it does to the victim. HSPs process emotions incredibly deeply.
Sure, but survival?
Let me finish. If you force an empathetic, traumatized person to wear an external mask of cold detachment without providing internal regulation, you cause massive somatic distress.
Okay, I hear you.
You are asking someone whose nervous system is already hijacked to tightly suppress their natural reactions. That leads to physical illness, panic attacks, and extreme emotional repression. It's essentially asking them to self-abandon to survive. And furthermore, gray rock can backfire disastrously in the real world.
Backfire how? If you give them nothing, they have nothing to use against you.
It backfires systemically because of the camouflage we talked about earlier. Think about family court or, a mediation session with HR.
Ah.
The covert narcissist is a master of public relations. In front of the judge or the mediator, the abuser plays the warm, concerned, slightly wounded victim perfectly.
And the victim looks crazy.
Yes. If the survivor is using gray rock, they come across as cold, uncooperative, passive-aggressive, or even hostile. Neutral third parties look at the flat, unresponsive survivor and think,
The narcissist was right. You really are the difficult one. That is why I champion the yellow rock method instead.
Yellow rock? You're suggesting they should project warmth to an active predator?
Not warmth, politeness, professionalism. Yellow rock acts as emotional Kevlar. You maintain strict, ironclad boundaries, but you use a highly structured, business-like template.
Like what?
Greeting, acknowledgement, factual response, courteous close. For example, "Hi, David. Thanks for letting me know. I will pick up the kids at 3 p.m. as planned. Take care." You are delivering the exact same lack of emotional supply as Grey Rock, but you wrap it in a polite exterior.
Okay, I see the utility in the optics of yellow rock for family court. Absolutely. A judge wants to see two reasonable adults.
Exactly.
But you are ignoring the predator's mindset. A covert narcissist isn't a normal adversary. They are a closed-loop system designed to seek out vulnerabilities. The danger of yellow rock is that any simulated warmth, even a simple thanks or take care, will be interpreted by the abuser as an opening.
It's not an opening, it's just...
We talked about intermittent reinforcement. The narcissist sees a polite greeting and thinks, the door is still slightly ajar. They still care what I think. I can hoover them back in. Grey rock leaves zero room for misinterpretation.
I disagree.
Yes, it requires somatic suppression, but survival often requires doing uncomfortable things. You are dealing with an individual who will use anonymous online accounts to stalk you, who will stage social media photos just to trigger your jealousy. You cannot afford to give them a single inch of emotional data.
But you're misunderstanding where the emotional data actually lives. The emotional supply isn't in the word hi. The supply is in your reaction to their bait. Let's say the narcissist sends an email that says, "You are a terrible mother. Your negligence is destroying the children. By the way, what time is the dentist appointment?"
Right.
If you use Grey Rock, you reply, 4 p.m. If you use Yellow Rock, you reply, "The dental appointment is Thursday at 4 p.m. Have a good day." In both cases, you completely ignore the word salad.
Okay.
You ignore the insults, you don't negotiate, you don't defend yourself. The boundary is identical.
Then why bother with the pleasantries?
Because Yellow Rock protects the survivor's internal landscape. When a survivor is forced to use Grey Rock, they often feel like they are letting the abusers steal their fundamental kindness and humanity. They feel cold and toxic themselves.
I see.
Yellow Rock says, "I can remain a polite, dignified human being. I can hold on to my core values and still give you absolutely nothing of my soul." It allows the victim to operate from a place of grounded, professional control, rather than frozen fear.
Well, I concede the point on internal dignity. You are optimizing for the survivor's psychological integrity, while I am optimizing for the absolute ruthless neutralization of the threat.
Exactly.
But fundamentally, both of our approaches recognize the same chilling reality based on the source material. The abuser is not going to change.
No, they aren't.
You can't negotiate with this pathology. A covert narcissist isn't a broken machine you can fix with enough love and patience. So the core of my position is this. To survive covert narcissism, you must coldly decode the predator's mask. You have to recognize their performative altruism, their endless pity plays, and their micro-insults for what they truly are, calculated mechanisms of coercive control. You have to stop looking at them as a wounded bird that needs nursing and start looking at them as a behavioral profile that requires strict, unyielding boundary management.
And my summary is that recognizing those mechanics is only step one. Step two, which is true healing, requires aggressively validating the victim's reality. If you are listening to this, you have to realize that your confusion, your self-doubt, the fact that you feel like you're losing your mind, these are normal biological responses to repeated relational trauma.
Right.
You are not crazy. You are not the toxic one. Your body was keeping score of an invisible abuse. Healing demands a trauma-informed approach where we stabilize that blaring car alarm in your nervous system, rewrite the false guilt planted by the abuser, and slowly rebuild your shattered self-trust.
We certainly agree that covert narcissism is an insidious, highly invisible form of abuse. It thrives in the blind spots of society. Because the abuser never raises their voice or throws a punch, the standard therapeutic models and legal systems frequently fail to adequately address it, leaving the survivor entirely isolated.
We are in complete lockstep on that. The invisibility is the weapon. But we will likely continue to disagree on the primary focus of the daily intervention. You lean toward treating the situation like a tactical defense operation, focusing on starving the predator.
Yep.
I prioritize the nervous system stabilization of the victim, ensuring they don't lose their own humanity in the process of surviving.
It is a profound and frankly chilling complexity to navigate. When you finally realize that the most dangerous people in your life might be the ones who speak the softest, who claim to be the most victimized, it fundamentally shifts how you view human behavior forever.
It shatters your worldview. And for listeners who might be experiencing that terrifying realization right now, who are sitting in their cars or walking their dogs thinking, oh my God, this is exactly what my partner is doing to me, or this is exactly how my boss operates. Please know that there is a vast amount of clinical insight waiting for you in the source material we pulled from today. You are not imagining the micro insults.
No, you aren't.
You are not crazy. And most importantly, you are not alone.
We leave it to you, the listener, to decide which psychological lens provides the most empowering path to reclaiming your reality. Do you study the predator's playbook to build your defenses, or do you focus inward on regulating your own nervous system? Just remember, the predator doesn't always break the door down. Sometimes they just stand outside, shivering in the cold, waiting for your empathy to invite them in. Thanks for joining us on The Debate.